Invalid. Yes, there are invalid things on enumeration district maps. Invalid 1950 census map ED numbers. Recognizing and repairing. And here are the topics I'm going to cover. The problem of rejected ED numbers. ED background, that's an enumeration district, or EDs. Recognizing partial numbers, split numbers. We'll talk about the one-step website, and we'll look at a county test example using the website and repairing, a city test example, and then we'll finish with a flowchart of the process. I expect to hear the question below many times when the 1950 census becomes public on April 1st, 2022. So let me change my voice to someone who is exasperated about this. The census district number I entered online, I spent a lot of time on this, to get its schedule image has been rejected. I copied the number accurately. I don't make mistakes. From a 1950 enumeration district map. What gives? And what can I do about it? Well, my advice is, with the processes shown in this video, check for two common problems which could cause that rejection. Check before using the map ED number and save yourself a lot of frustration. So just a comment that if you had used the Morse one-step unified tool for finding those 1950 census ED numbers, the resultant ED numbers would not have been affected by the problems I'm going to discuss. So let's do some ED background. Probably a lot of you have seen this or should know about it, but we'll do a brief review for people who might be unfamiliar with the area. An enumeration district, or ED, is defined by the National Archives as a basic geographic area of a size that could be covered by a single census taker within one census period. And you can see on the 1950 schedule, which is the background, that there's a place for the ED number. Since 1930, EDs are a two-part, and that's important, a two-part number. The first part, the prefix, denotes the county or a large city, usually of 50,000 or more in 1950. That's followed by a dash and then a second number. Within a state, each ED number is unique. The EDs are on maps, and the National Archive put over 9,500 1950 maps online on their catalog. I'm going to show you where that catalog is located. It includes 1950 county ED maps and maps of urban areas with 5 or more EDs. There are missing maps. The one-step site also has a 1950 map index that's very efficient in finding census maps, and I also included there some missing maps that the National Archives does not have. These maps, these ED maps, are not the usual map that you used to. And I have a whole video on the problems that you may face using these maps. I think you would enjoy that. So why do we want to know about EDs? We want to know about them because they can locate the population schedules that our targets are on. We can go from an address location to an enumeration district number, and using that number we can get the images. Now, even if there's a full name index eventually, which there probably will be, locational tools are still important, and other YouTube videos I've made will discuss the reasons for that. So we're going to talk about two problems that may trip you up. The first problem I call as a partial ED number problem. You record the number that you see on the map, but due to a lack of knowledge that you have about large city ED map numbering formats, that number is actually incomplete. Let's look at Long Beach, California, 1950 enumeration district map. The EDs are defined by the orange lines, and there's a number inside of that little polygon. So we look at the circle, and there's a number 72. Is 72 the enumeration district number? And some people will put it down as if it was, but it's not. Remember, I told you that the ED was a two-part number, and for large cities, they did not write the prefix down in these polygons. They decided it was a lot of work, and some polygons are really small. So how do you know what the prefix is? What you can do is look at the legend that's on the map. Now, Long Beach had 4 submaps. This is map 3. The legend is there. The legend has space for all ED numbers preceded by, but it's blank. And you have to go all the way back to map 1. And when you go back to map 1, you find out that all ED numbers are preceded by 65. So that number is not 72. That number is 65-72. Does this mean that if you have a large number of these non-prefix numbers, you're going to have to go back to the original maps to find the prefix? Well, no, you won't have to do that, because I'll show you later a non-map way of finding the prefix for your large city. The second problem is a split ED number, which can occur in both city and county areas. And this is something that will arise, and you may not know about it initially. So I looked for a comparable photograph for the 1950 census, but did not find one. So we used 1960. So here are the cartographers. The Census Bureau did not go out and make their own maps. They found maps from a variety of sources, and then they drew on the map the enumeration district boundaries. They had a number of protocols they used to draw the boundaries, but they didn't want to make it too small or too large, actually, because a numerator, the census taker, might not have enough time to enumerate all the people there. But they did their best shot at this. So they sent it out, and they probably did this in 1949. And in 1950, the supervisors, who were closer to the actual situation, looked at the map and said, no, I don't think we can have the resources to have one census taker do that. And so here, as part of the procedures I saw found in 1940, it says that during the course of the canvass, area managers were authorized to subdivide established enumeration districts when necessary. The procedure to be followed allowed for the original ED number to be retained and the parts to be marked A, B, etc. So let me emphasize that. The original number doesn't exist anymore. And that's the number that you see on the map. Instead, they subdivided, they used that number and put the letter A directly after the ED number, or B to designate a subdivision. Why did they split the ED? Well, the area may have had too many people for one census taker to sample, as I mentioned. The area might have had an institution that required a separate enumeration district number. But the important thing is that the ED map usually does not show the resultant splits. Here's one that did, though you might have looked over it very quickly and not saw the splits. This is from Philadelphia. We're looking at 1550. It's not 1550, it's 51-1550. It's a big area. The map itself is dated probably a 1940-41 map for the 1950 census. And you can see that someone put in probably pencil A, B, C, D. Well, that actually shows the enumeration district subdivisions. So somebody subdivided this, made actually 5 new enumeration districts from the original one. The 51-1550 no longer exists, and you may not know this. Now, the way of detecting splits, and I've done this and some other people have as well as a recommendation, is if an entry program rejects the ED number you entered and you entered a 2-part number, so to avoid that prefix problem, then re-enter your number, but this time add an A to the end of the number. You look through it, see if your residence of interest is there. If it isn't, you'd enter a B on the number, look through that, etc. So if that works, add letters for additional EDs until you stop getting results. But looking back on that, I don't think that's a good way of doing it, and that's the reason why I made this video. In retrospect, the previous hint is an inefficient strategy for map-only researchers. They should be able to tell in advance if their ED number was split, how many splits there were, and what the splits covered, i.e. the definitions, so they didn't have to go through all of the splits to find the residence. If you had a list of 1950 ED prefixes and 1950 split ED numbers and their definitions, that would probably help resolve this problem. Is there such a list? And the answer is yes. It's at the One Step website. The One Step website is at stevemorse.org, not stevemorse.com. And you will want the unified tool on the U.S. Census section for census research. Even though it wasn't designed to do what I'm going to show you, it's there. And we're going to use just some of the power of the unified tool. And the unified tool is at that address. You probably would want to bookmark it. And you could always stop the video to get that address. So I'm going to show you a county example and a city example. Here we have a part of a map from Cuyahoga County. This is outside of Cleveland. And you have some family there in Warrensville Township, say, on the eastern side. You spend a lot of time trying to find this. It doesn't have its own ED map. It's going to be in a county map. And there is no county map for this county. There's Cleveland, and then there is outside of Cleveland, and you're looking at outside of Cleveland. And you went through a number of these submaps. There are 8 of them that make up this vicinity map until you finally got to this area. And you feel, hey, that's pretty good. You write down 18-348. 18-348 as the enumeration district. The problem is that Warrensville Township, there are 3 EDs here. There's actually 7 EDs in the township. And that's because of splitting EDs. So how are you going to know that? Well, what you can do with your set of EDs is go to the unified tool. This is the unified tool. And I have already selected. You select things. I've selected in a state, Ohio, from the pull-down list. I have selected from the county of interest. And the next thing I need to get is the list of EDs. And I do that by going down to the left side where it says Get 1950 ED Numbers. I click on that. And when I do so, I see all the EDs in the county. You notice there are 2 prefixes here. Down at the bottom is 92 because that's Cleveland. It has its own prefix. but we're interested in the 18s. And the idea is that you have your number, and you're going to check to see if it's a split ED or not. You can do that now. And you can see that 18-348 appears as a split ED. It's split into, I think, 7 parts. A, B, no, C, 3 parts. 18348A, 18348B, etc. Okay, so now we've answered 2 things. We've answered that that's a split ED and the number of EDs that it was split into. But now we want to know what the definitions are. Just to give you some idea, I took all the 18 dashes and I colored in the ones that were split. And you can see that if you do enough searches here, you're going to run into this problem of a split ED. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go on that previous page to this box that's on the bottom, and you're going to make sure that the ED description transcribed is clicked on, it is marked. And it says that clicking on a 1950 ED number will display its ED description. Well, if I had clicked on 18-351, it would show a single description. If I were to click, before we modified this, on 18-348A, it would only give that description. But now what we can do is we can click on any of those 348s, and when we do so, magically appears the table showing the enumeration district definitions, bounded on the north, east, south, and west side. And now you see that why they subdivided this, because 2 of them actually are institutions. So now you know that your relative who had some maybe farm on the east side of Warrensville is in 18-348A, and that should not be rejected. So I thank Steve Morse, who modified the unified tool at my suggestion to enable showing all the split definitions at the same time. Now note there's a way, which I won't cover in detail here, to search all EDs from that have in them the statement Warrensville Township and get a table of all 7 ED definitions together. The one-step tool has a database of transcriptions of EDs, and you can enter a phrase, and the utility will look for the phrase, will return enumeration districts which have that phrase, and then you can generate a table. Let's look at a city example. And basically the steps are pretty much the same. In fact, there's one less step. So I chose Fort Worth, Texas, which had an experimental program that tried to get school teachers to do the census. They thought they could do it during their spring break, and it would improve the quality of the 1950 census. And because of that, they split a large number of EDs in Fort Worth. Probably half of them are split. So here we have one enumeration district that I picked from Fort Worth, Texas. You know it's incomplete because there's no prefix here. Maybe you didn't know that before. We're gonna make you aware of that. Is it a split ED? So we're going to do the same thing we did on the county. We go to the unified tool. 1950 on the top is what you should see. There are other years hiding underneath that. We have now picked Texas. We don't need the county. We don't need to do that. We open up the city or town. We go down to Fort Worth, and we click on it. And as soon as we click on Fort Worth, we see all the enumeration districts that Fort Worth, Texas has in 1950, all of them. We see that the prefix is 261. So if you didn't know that before, it's obvious here that your number is in incomplete. So what we want to do is we want to go down to the bottom. We want to make sure that the ED description, a little circle, is filled in. And we notice that in this case, 284 has been split into 7 parts. In fact, some of them are only a block in size. We can now click on any of these 284s, an A, a D, a G, and when we do so, magically appears the table which shows you each of the splits and what the boundaries are. And from your knowledge about your location, you should be able to change that 261, 284, or even 284 when you started to test this, and get down to the right enumeration district. This is a flow chart I put together of exactly what we did. And if you look at it, you realize that that this is the procedure for something of like a city or a county. And you might want to pause the video to look at that. But this is a flow chart to give you an idea of how to test your numbers before you need to use them using the one-step website. You could also repeat your location search using the full power of the Morse One-Step Unified tool, which negates the problems covered in this video, because we know where the splits are. We know where the splits are. We know that all EDs have to have a prefix, and so you can use this as well. So I hope that's going to avoid a lot of frustration for you. This is another of my JDW talks. I have YouTube talks on census resources. I'm getting close to, if not reached, 20 of them on the 1950 census. Some of them are really kind of cute, like training films. I have talks on Ellis Island, immigration, and I am a retired university professor, a field biologist, and I have a number of talks on natural history topics and virtual birding field trips and other field trips as well. So I and Steve Morse and our volunteers hope that you can get to your census pages and when the 1950 census becomes public, and you can do it without frustration. Thanks. And if you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe. I don't make videos that often, but I'd like to see how many people are using the site.